world where insanity reigns supreme and safety pin manufacturers are running out of metal for the diapers of the leftists, it's comforting to know an ancient, fat, long-haired, bearded reprobate has your mind in mind. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, and despite every attempt by the SHR Media Network to revoke his shameless contract, we return to the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon.
You're listening to Late Night Radio on the SHR Media Network. Caution, there will be mature themes explored and potentially adult language used. If conservatarian words, phrases, certain concepts, or rhetoric offends you, tune out now.
Uh-oh, guess what day it is? Guess what day it is? Huh? Anybody? Julie, hey, guess what day it is? Oh, come on, I know you can hear me. Mike. What day is it, Mike?
Oh, you magnificent bastard, I read your book.
I drink your milkshake.
How dare you?
I call that bold talk for a one-eyed fat man.
Fill your hand, you son of a bitch!
Of course you realize this means war.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum.
Welcome. Today is Thursday, January 14th. Year of our Lord, 2021. Welcome to the saloon. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to BZ's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, where I'm broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, always spelled with a K, a mere 2 miles east. The locus of evil on the entire left coast, the Bill Mill, the belly of the beast. The Capitol building in downtown Sacramento at 10th and L Streets, where late at night you can hear the death of common sense and its concomitant wail as it wafts from that putrefying edifice. And at the end of the show, when I exit the plush, resplendent, sumptuous, and palatial SHR Media Studios, I'll be smelling the odoriferous stench of sulfur, brimstone, and evil emanating from downtown. Be forewarned, what you're about to hear for the next 2 hours consists of my opinion and no one else's. And because of the fear porn that has gripped this nation, the saloon is no longer open, but I am still serving stiff drinks. Fact, history, logic, rationality, proportion, context, tradition, intent, and common sense out the back door. Also a reminder, we don't water our drinks, just like we don't water our conversation. Politics, religion, crime, culture, race, sex, economics, science, law. We talk about it all right here at the saloon, where the speech is free, but the booze is not. This is 2021. I am done with bipartisanship and compromise. This is the new age of modern political warfare because, make no mistake, we are at war. And the information that's coming out now indicates every bit of Trump's impeachment was predicated upon lies. And more lies. That aside, we're not going to do politics tonight. We're instead going to talk about an issue that infects many, many people around the nation. And of all the people that it does infect, it hits law enforcement most fully. Now, for the first hour, perhaps into the second, and this is the only topic for tonight. For the first hour and perhaps a portion of the second, and when I'm done, I'm done. We'll be talking about how suicide impacts law enforcement. And tonight I'll be speaking to a gentleman by the name of Gary Bush. I want to give you some facts, though, before we begin. Police officers are at a higher risk of suicide than any other profession. In fact, suicide is so prevalent in the profession that the number of police officers who died by suicide is more than triple that of officers who were fatally injured in the line of duty. Researchers are attributing these statistics to the unique combination of early access to deadly weapons, easy access, intense stress, and human devastation that police are exposed to on a daily basis. I'll get to that. 13 out of every 100,000 people die by suicide in the general population. That number increases to 17 out of 100,000 officers for police officers. During the 2018 calendar year, 167 law enforcement officers tragically took their own lives. That number is projected to increase and did increase to 217 during 2019. As of August of 2018, a total of 134 officers committed suicide within 4 months of the year, still left and unaccounted for. Some prevention advocates say that these stats don't even reflect the true number of suicides, as some families choose not to report the cause of death or instead transcribe the death as accidental. California, this should be no surprise. California, Florida, New York, and Texas suffer from the highest rates of officer suicides, with each reporting at least 10 police suicides last year. In fact, the NYPD, the New York Police Department, even received national attention during 2018 for its high rate of officer suicides. NYPD Commissioner James O'Neill declared a mental health crisis as the city grappled with the suicide deaths of 9 police officers. At least 6 of the 9 deaths in NYPD involved a gun, many using their own service weapons. The Chicago Police Department experienced a similar situation in 2018 and was forced to confront its own epidemic of police suicides, with the second largest force in the nation consisting of over 13,000 officers. Chicago's police suicide rate was 60% higher than the national law enforcement average. The tragedy experienced by NYPD and Chicago PD sparked the launch of a new mental health campaign, which included doubling the number of clinicians and therapists available to officers, as well as a video campaign showing senior officers admitting to their own struggles with mental health. And President Donald Trump, still my president, also authorized $7.5 million in grant funding for police suicide prevention, mental health screenings, and training as departments across the country worked to decrease those particular numbers. So, as with a number of the guests, I won't say most of the guests, but as with a number of the guests that are on my show, I meet some of the most interesting people on the internet by way of social media or other venues, and sometimes recommended by other people. I just come across folks. And I'm already at no, so sometimes I say, hey, you sound like an interesting chick or cat. Would you care to be on my show? Frequently, I hear no response. Frequently, I do. Tonight's guest, I likewise discovered on the internet through social media, so I contacted him. We spoke. He made a reference to a certain book, which I then purchased. And so here we are tonight. Now, the general topic isn't one of which people enjoy speaking generally, but it's something that I think has to be acknowledged, if for no other reason than to publicize that help is available. So tonight my guest is Gary Bush, and I'd like to introduce him right now. So good evening, Gary Bush. How are you, sir?
Good, sir. How are you?
Good. Now, Gary is in Florida right now. We spoke just before the show, and I said, Gary, because that's his name, is it, 80 degrees right there right now? I said, nope. 60 degrees right now in Florida. So I'm going to state a couple of facts up front. I promoted this show to a couple of groups and sites that I haven't done before. So I suspect that I'm going to have some new listeners who haven't heard me or the show before. And then once I'm done, I'm going to get out of the way and let Gary Bush speak, and that's why he's here tonight. I'll also be asking a couple of questions along the way in this journey tonight, and I'm also going to be referencing a book that Gary Bush suggested that I read when I first called him last week. And the book is called, here it is, let me pull it up for you right now if you happen to be watching on video. It's called The Price They Pay, and it's by Karen Solomon and Jeffrey McGill. It's published in 2015. So the story of Gary Bush is the very first one in this book. So for those new to the show, I will let you know that I was in law enforcement for 41 years. I worked for both federal law enforcement and local law enforcement, two departments here in California, always spelled it with a K. I retired in 2016, and after that, for me, pretty much everything changed. Life became, well, let's just say much different. And to me, this is the first time I'm saying this, to me, a lot more difficult. Suicide in law enforcement, by the way, is pretty much a taboo subject. Most officers would much rather just gloss over the topic. But along the way in my career, I personally knew 9 officers who committed suicide for any number of reasons. Like was said in the intro, most shoot themselves. Firearms are at hand. One stepped off of a 500-foot bridge that I knew, and another one walked in front of a Union Pacific train. And it's no surprise that military personnel come back from combat assignments with PTSD, scarred from their own personal journeys. Their time under duress can range from one tour to, any number of tours. The terrible things that they see and have experienced are not to be doubted in any way, shape, or form. But I submit this, that there is a difference, between military and law enforcement, and that's this. Soldiers don't customarily spend 20 years in combat. And that's essentially what you have in law enforcement. Combat that is basically CQB, which is close quarters battle. Cops frequently do that. Well, in my case, I happen to work in law enforcement twice that period of time. I took literally a world tour of my final department where I retired as a sergeant after 35 years. And I worked most every assignment from patrol to detectives. The only 2 spots I never worked in detectives were narcotics, because I just didn't dig drugs, and burglary, because I didn't want to deal with all the property. Otherwise, I worked theft, the Warrant Fugitive Bureau, child abuse, sex assaults, robbery, and then homicide. That couldn't cause any problems. This is something that I don't talk about. I did it my very first show back in 2017, and then I shut the hell up about it. I had my own critical incident in the 1970s where I was involved in a shooting. I'm still here. You can do the math on that one. To this day, I'm thankful there was no such thing as the internet back then. The stresses were terrible. There was no such thing in the 70s as counseling or any real time off. It was back to handling calls the next day or maybe a vacation day. If you happened to have the time, you could swing the time, somebody would let you take the time off. Since then, all told, my brain theater plays nightly, where I sit neatly in the little mental balcony of my own demise. So with that, patrol, warrants, child abuse, robbery, and homicide, I happen to have a wide arrangement of topics and material to choose from that revisit me in the dark of night. Every night since my retirement. So, that's my background. enough about me, but that's just enough background to let you know that essentially I am sympathetic to our guest tonight, Gary Bush, and we share a bunch of commonalities. So welcome, Gary Bush, and thank you again for being here tonight.
Thank you, sir.
Also, I have to do this because most of my guests, for whatever reason, happen to be on the East Coast. So it's 8:17 right now, which means it's 11:17 where you are. And in Bolivia, it's 17:49 and 223.72 seconds. Subparagraph 4, drawer 3 in Bolivian time, but I could never understand the Bolivian time. Let's go back to the book, though. The book, The Price They Pay, tells a little bit about your background, but with first-time guests, Gary Bush, I always want to ask people about those things as well. So can you tell folks where you were born, raised, that sort of thing? What was your background when you were a kid?
I was born and raised in West Virginia, and we lived near the capital city, Charleston. Had two wonderful parents. My mother stayed at home with the four of us, raised with three sisters. My father was a hospital supply salesman. Grew up in a wonderful, wonderful family. My mother diagnosed with cancer when I was 13. She died 7 years later at the age of 44. And my father died the year after that at the age of 46 from a heart attack.
Holy moly.
I started college, went to Marshall University. Your audience might know it from the movie We Are Marshall from Matthew McConaughey.
Oh, okay.
And I couldn't get through my mother, and I failed out of school. And then I went on a 5-year hiatus. I didn't do jack, except travel. And then I met my wife in 1987. We dated for 8 months, got married. I went back to school, finished my bachelor's, and then got hired on November 25th of 1990 at the police department.
Okay, when you were in school, Gary Bush, what were some of your favorite topics in school or sports? Through school and high school, what kind of things interested you, so to speak?
I was in 3 different choirs and 4 different bands, from marching band to orchestra to jazz band. I played trumpet, and then I also sang. I was in musicals and plays all the way up until I graduated from college. I also wrestled and played golf. I was on the wrestling team and the golf team. It's kind of a different mix, but
yeah,
not too many golfers wrestle, and not too many wrestlers golf. But I enjoyed both of them, and I loved my motorcycles.
Oh, cool. Do you have one now?
No, sir. My back won't allow that mess.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, if I had a record one now, it'd be all over.
Folks, we're talking to Gary Bush. Tonight's topic is suicide prevention in law enforcement. I located Gary Bush on the internet, and he advised me again to buy this book that I'm holding up right now, if you happen to be watching on either Facebook Live or YouTube on the SHR Media channel. It's called The Price They Pay, and it's by Karen Solomon and Jeffrey McGill. It came out in 2015, and it's talking about suicide in law enforcement, and it's a topic nobody really wants to talk about, but we're going to be addressing here tonight, if for no other reason than the obvious. Gary Bush is still here, and he's talking. So, Gary Bush, you graduated from the police academy when you were 29. Now, what police academy was that in what state?
Graduated from the 4th Charleston Police Department Police Academy in Charleston, West Virginia, March 29th of 1991.
Okay. Most officers get into law enforcement earlier. So before that, before you went into the academy at 29, What kind of things were you doing for employment or jobs?
Name it. I worked at the front desk at hotels, 2 different hotels. I was a travel agent. I was a tour guide. And I was doing all this while I was going to school, so all of it was part-time. And one day my wife was reading the paper, and she said, "Honey, the sheriff's department's hiring." I said, "Really?" And I'd already started criminal justice classes and thought about it and went and took the test. That's not where I got hired, but I ended up taking 4 different tests. Had 2 job offers and chose South Charleston Police Department.
Okay, so you graduated from the academy and you went to work directly for the first and the only agency, South Charleston Police Department in West Virginia. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you began your career in 1990. Tell us what happened when you first went into law enforcement. You're trained at the academy. Now you're in law enforcement. I'm assuming that you began in patrol and you had some training officers.
Yes, I had an FTO, field training officer, that I rode with for 3 months. And at the end of that 3 months, I was let go, turned loose. I had no clue what I was doing. I felt like, I was like, wow. It's funny. Sitting in class is one thing, but being out here on your own and having to know, and not having anybody beside you, as far as a partner or an FTO, it took me a little while to get things going in the right direction as far as, me feeling comfortable with what I was doing. And I was on probation. We all are, for 1 year. And then at the end of that year, they decide whether they want to keep you or not.
Okay, you brought up a very interesting point. Gary Bush, do you think the academy adequately prepared you for what you were going to encounter on the street?
Yes. As far as weapons are concerned, as far as tactics are concerned, as far as the law is concerned, as far as accident investigation, yes. As far as the psychological and emotional aspects of it, no, not even close. They had 3 hours. The academy was 16 weeks, and we had 3 hours dedicated to the psychological and emotional effects of law enforcement. And basically, the 3 hours was spent saying, "Don't take it home with you." In other words, don't take it out on your family or your friends if you have a bad day at work. That's about it.
All right. You also went through 3 months of training. Do you think that 3 months of training adequately prepared you for what you're about to face? Now, let me predicate this. I think I discovered that your department was at the time about 35, 40 officers, right around in there? 30 officers. Okay. So it wasn't a massively huge department, and no. I would guess that your call rate wasn't massive either. In other words, you guys weren't slammed with calls all the time. And so I'm hoping that you had the ability during training to go in a little bit more depth and detail about some of those calls. Or, well, let me just ask you this. Do you think the South Charleston Police Department there in West Virginia adequately prepped you for what you were going to discover in their department? Not a huge department, about 30 officers, but still, you had a very weighty task to perform.
Well, first of all, the capital city was adjacent to us.
Okay.
And even though it's a small capital city compared to most, the west side of their city is the worst side, which was adjacent to our east side, and there was a lot of bleed over of crime. So we were busier than you would think.
Okay.
For that small of a department. And, I mean, there were many nights that there's no way you could even start your paperwork because you were going from call to call. And but then you had other nights like Sunday evening where it's like, what am I doing here? As far as adequately preparing me, the administration that was there at the time did a hell of a job, in my opinion, right off the bat. And I was lucky because of my FTO, who he and I became dear friends, who has since died from cancer. But he went out of his way to make sure that I knew what the heck I was doing out there. So because of him, I would have to say yes, I was adequately prepared. Again, in all aspects other than the psychological and emotional, because we didn't talk about that stuff.
Okay. The other thing that I want to point out that people don't want to readily acknowledge is the fact that statistically in the 90s, crime was higher than just about any other time except for the 70s when I began. So when people attempt to tell you, folks, that this year, 2021, 2020, 2019, 2018, are the highest, it's the highest rate of crime ever experienced in the United States. I want to tell you from personal experience and the statistics as well, bullshit, especially in terms of gun crime. In terms of gun crime, it was off the hook in the 1990s, in the mid-1990s, 94, 95, 96. By the way, that was also the time that I was in robbery and homicide. I worked all my cases, all my robbery suspects. Many of my robbery suspects became my homicide suspects. Imagine that.
Yeah.
So when people say that, oh, it's the worst time now for shootings and guns and crimes. No. Wrong. It wasn't. It isn't. It was then. Go ahead, Gary.
I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt you. We had three variables. We were just coming into our own concerning HIV and AIDS.
Mm-hmm.
That made our job extremely dangerous. Also, crack had just come down.
Yes.
Basically started in New York and first around 1986, but it wasn't there in West Virginia. Well, that started. And you have to understand, West Virginia and Charleston, West Virginia, is the smallest city in the nation that has 3 interstates running through it. There's only 53,000 people in Charleston, West Virginia.
Wow.
Well, it also happens to be halfway between New York City and Miami. Well, the drugs come up, the guns go down. And where's halfway? Charleston, West Virginia.
Right there where you are. Okay, folks, We're talking to Gary Bush, and the topic tonight is law enforcement suicide prevention. I read some very sad statistics at the beginning of the show. We're going to come right back. When we come right back, you'll discover that the other epidemic besides crack cocaine and gun crime that we discovered, well, there was another issue in the 90s that everybody had to deal with, which was a fairly new issue. And I'll get to that when we come right back. I'm BZ. That's Gary Bush. We'll be back. You too.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Hey, are you guys listening? This is Shannon from Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM on SHR Media. I know you've been wondering where we are and what's been going on. Well, folks, that's right. We're back. So please join us 7 to 9 a.m. Monday through Thursday on SHR Media, on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and Spotify, and Facebook Live at 11 a.m. on Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM at Facebook. You don't want to miss a minute. We've got lots of guests, lots of segments, and lots of interesting things. And let's face it, there's nowhere for you to go, so you might as well tune in. Again, Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM. We're back live on the air on SHR Media, 7 to 9 a.m. Monday through Thursday, audio and Facebook Live, audio and video. Yes, we are going to do video. Facebook Live, Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM. Hope to see you soon.
Unleashed Jeremy Hansen, the most explosive pro-American podcast on the planet. Pro-MAGA, pro-Trump, pro-conservative. Come join the resistance. Fight for what really matters in America. 5 p.m. Central on UJHLive.com, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Pandora, or MAGABook.com. Come join the resistance and fight for America. Unleashed Jeremy Hansen.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And welcome back, folks. Thanks for being here tonight. We're dealing with one topic only, and that's suicide prevention in law enforcement. Because if you've been in law enforcement for any length of time, you know somebody that's committed suicide. And if you haven't 1 year, you will later. So it's a large issue that we need to address, and I will have some places for you to go and recommend to you towards the end of the show. Since it's a single topic night, I don't have anything else. I'm just going to go until we end. And when we run out of information or questions, then I'm going to kill it for the night. And then you guys have a great weekend, and I'll be back next Tuesday. So my guest tonight is Gary Bush. He worked for the South Charleston Police Department in West Virginia, a department of about 30 people, 30 officers. And he came across his own very critical incident. There was, well, maybe I'll form this in a question. Gary Bush, was there any first incident when something clicked and you said, hey, you know what? I know this job is really for me. Anything where you finally realized, I think I fit here?
I think the first time I helped a child that was in trouble.
Okay.
That had been abused. And I protected that child and put both his parents in jail for the abuse. And he went to his grandmother's house. But while I had him, the few hours I did, the look of relief on this baby's face was, that's when I knew.
Okay. So you got some job satisfaction out of that, and that essentially buttressed you into believing that, you know what, I think I do believe. I believe that I need to be here. This is my calling.
Yep.
So where did you spend the bulk of your time, Gary Bush? Was it in patrol?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Would it be fair then to say that things went mostly well until the time that you took a drunk man home on Christmas Eve?
Oh, wow. I forgot about that one. Mike.
Can you tell us about that incident? You took a drunk man home on Christmas Eve. What transpired?
Well, we got a call of domestic Christmas Eve. In fact, it was about 22:30 hours. I was getting off in a half hour, and the guy was at a convenience store, and his face was all beat to heck. And he had had a few beers, but he wasn't drunk. And the family didn't want to press charges. I'd already been to see them, and they just wanted him out of there. I said, all right. So my shift commander said, just take him home, Gary. So I patted him down and put him in the back of my cruiser, and he lived in an adjacent city. He didn't live in our city. So we're on the way to his house, and he starts crying in the back of my cruiser, which, that's not unusual. But he then starts telling me about how he was abused as a child. And that's what he got his butt kicked for, was hitting his own child. And about halfway there, he suddenly stopped crying, and we went on to something else. Got to his house, and I got out, let him out, and he said, "Officer Bush, I wish you and your family a Merry Christmas." I said, "Well, thank you, Mike." And I said, "I wish you a Merry Christmas." I said, "You'll be okay." He goes, "Yeah, I'm just going to go in and have a beer and go to sleep." And Mike went in and hung himself by the ceiling fan.
Okay, and then you went to work the next day. Something happened.
Well, I went to work the next day, and all of a sudden, I'm called in on the carpet. "What the hell did you do to this guy last night?" I'm like, "What do you mean, what did I do?" "Took him home." "Well, we found him hanging from his ceiling fan." This was on Christmas Day. And all I could think of was of his kids, the ones that he had beat the night before. And the last thing they were going to remember was that the last person who saw and was with their father was a police officer. And that broke my heart.
Did you, Gary Bush, suffer any fallout from that incident?
Not administratively or legally. I mean, they sat me down and interviewed me and all that crap. There was an investigation, but nothing came from it. But it messed with me psychologically, emotionally.
Okay. Would it be fair to say, Gary Bush, that was the beginning of perhaps, I don't know, questioning if the police department was right for you? Or did you at that point simply figure, well, that's one of a series of glitches that I'm probably going to encounter during my career?
Yeah, one of a series of glitches. I had no desire after that to leave. It was
okay.
It sucked. I mean, it was horrible, but I'm still here to do a job, and I love this. I love this profession. So, no, I had no thoughts of leaving.
Okay. Now we're going to end up kind of cutting to the chase a little bit, if you will. Exactly 1 year, which I think is the most staggering bit of irony possible in your life. And you correct me if I'm wrong on this, please. Exactly 1 year after that 1993 incident, the suicide involving Michael, like I say, in a massive bit of irony, something occurred in 1994, and that became essentially your predicating event. I can't think of another. It was a critical incident. So, Gary...
Well, before we go to 1994, let's back up to 1992.
Okay.
The weekend of Christmas.
Okay.
I made a traffic stop on a 16-year-old, and it was about 1 o'clock in the morning. And we had a curfew in South Charleston at 10 o'clock. And I said, "What are you doing? Are you going home?" And this and that. And we had a bunch of vending machines broken into, and these kids had $100 in quarters on them. They said they were playing poker. Okay. Anyway, I had headquarters call his father, and his dad said, "Tell him to get his ass home." So I took the evidence, and I said, "I'll be talking to you later." And your dad told you, and you're driving his van, he wants you home now. And the child went home and stuck a 30-30 in his mouth and blew his brains all over his bedroom. That happened the year before, Michael.
Oh, okay.
And then 1994.
Okay. So the ironical timing of that, you're sent to a call. Well, actually, if I'm not mistaken, I think you volunteered for that call.
I was a field training officer for a female rookie, and she was supposed to go, even though she was off of training. She was still in her rookie year, and I said, "No, you stay here." We had a Christmas party that night, and I said, "You stay here." And the call was a drunk uncle harassing the family. I said, "You stay here, finish your paperwork, and I'll go take care of this drunk, and then we'll both go to the Christmas party." And so I went instead of her. And I took another rookie with me.
Okay, so as you go into the house, then what were the circumstances? What happened?
We pulled up, not in front of the house, but, as you know, tactically a few houses down. And a young kid comes running out the front door and screaming for help. Our uncle's has been holding us hostage. And I was like, whoa, calm down. And I was trying to get some information out of him to see what I was dealing with. And I said, "Does he have a weapon?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "What's he got?" He said, "I don't know. It's a long gun." Which, in West Virginia, that's a rifle or a shotgun or anywhere else, really. And I said, "Well, what room is he in?" He said, "He just ran out the back door." So I go down the alley beside the house and into the backyard, and they have a garage back there, and part of the garage was made into an apartment. And I could see a light on. The door was shut, but it wasn't locked. It was just pushed to, and I could see a light on it inside. And I walked up, and I could hear some noise inside. So I knocked on the door. I'm on one side, Rookie's on the other, and no answer. I shoved the door open, and I do a quick peek, and there's a rectangular room, I don't know, about 10 feet long, and at the end of it, perpendicular, is a bed, and the suspect is laying on the bed. And you can smell the liquor just from opening the door. So I go to step in, and as soon as I step in, he sits up on the bed. And as he sits up, I'm scanning. I'm trying to find the rifle, trying to find the weapon. I don't see it. He reaches to his right, picks it up off the bed. It was amongst the covers, and then starts to swing it at me. Well, I start backing up because I'm in a fatal funnel, and I'm trying to get the hell out of Dodge. And I pull my weapon up, train it on him, and I scream at him, drop the weapon, 3 times, and he wasn't dropping it. And I fired one shot and then stepped out and to the left. I did another quick peek, and I saw him kind of lean back against the wall, and I went back in with my weapon on him, and the rifle had fallen on the ground, and I holstered my weapon. I spun him around and handcuffed him. Now, I had no clue whether I'd hit him or not. 0. He had on like 5 layers of clothing, and the top of him was a dark green sweater. And I couldn't see anything, so I thought I missed him. And the funny thing is I thought my SWAT commander is going to kill me because I missed him. It's weird the things that go through your mind when you're in an emergent situation. And then on the other hand, I'm thinking, thank God I missed him, because the threat's over. But I thought, there's no way. I started flipping through his shirts, and I get down to the bottom shirt, which was a T-shirt. And a little to the left of his sternum, about nipple height, was a hole. And there was blood coming out around the hole just a little bit, but there was flesh poking through that hole that was stopping the blood flow. And I told the rookie, I said, holler at headquarters, tell them shots fired, suspect down. I need first responders and backup. And I set him up and I looked at him. I looked at his eyes, and I could already see him clouding over. And I thought, this man's going to die. And this was totally against protocol, but I unhandcuffed him and I held his hand. And I prayed with him. And I thank God to let him live. He died in front of me. Paramedics got there, and I walked out the door. And it was like I was in a fog. And they brought him back. He died 2 more times. They brought him back, and then after the third time he died, they couldn't bring him back, and he died at 01:30. That was on Christmas Eve.
Okay, now prior to that incident, Gary Bush, had you ever had occasion to fire your weapon at all in the department?
No, sir.
Okay. Now we're talking about 1994
yes,
now?
Sir.
Okay. In the 70s, there was no such thing as counseling. It's get the hell back in your car and start shagging calls again. So afterwards, that night, what happened?
Well, first of all, this man's family lived all around it. And they made me sit in front of that scene for an hour and a half in the cruiser. And that family was screaming at me, telling me they were going to kill me, kill my family. I was a dead man. This went on for an hour and a half while I sat there in that cruiser. And then they took me to headquarters and made me sit in a room, couldn't talk to anybody, couldn't say anything. And I sat there for 5 hours. Now, my wife at the time, well, she's still my wife, but at the time, she was a nurse. She didn't get off until 2300. Well, she had gotten off long before, and she hadn't heard from me, but she had heard about the shooting. Just didn't know if I was involved or not. So I called Carmen, and right after I found out that he had died, and told her what happened, and then I waited till 0500. State police came in and took my statement, my rookie statement, and I went home.
Okay. So the people that conducted the OIS, the officer-involved shooting, was the state of West Virginia Police.
Correct.
Okay. And when you went home, did you speak with your wife into more detail?
It's funny because she came and picked me up, and she asked me if I wanted to drive, and I said, hell yeah, I want to drive. I can't sit over, So we started going down the road, and she said, honey, do you want to talk about this? And I was like, yeah, I want to talk about it. I've been sitting alone for how long, And I said, I definitely, especially want to talk about it to you. And when we got through talking, she looked at me and she said, I want you to know something. I said, what's that? She said, I know without a doubt that if you had to shoot him, it was the right thing to do. And you don't know how bad I needed to hear those words.
It should come as no surprise, folks, that when an incident like this occurs, frequently families fall apart. It should come as no surprise that when, say, a son or a daughter passes in a family, that family falls apart. That didn't happen in your case, did it, Gary Bush?
No, sir. We're in a couple of months, it'll be 33 years of marriage, and I couldn't be happier with that lovely lady I'm married to.
Well, God bless you, sir. That's fabulous.
Thank you.
Now, the authors in this book, and again, I'm going to hold this up. If you haven't read it, I would highly recommend it. I don't know if you can get it in Kindle. Perhaps you can. This is a hard copy that I happened to purchase. It's called The Price They Pay, and it's by authors Karen Solomon and Jeffrey McGill. It was published in 2015. The authors of this book, The Price They Pay, talk about politics in your office. So how were politics involved in your shooting? Or were they involved at all?
So, yeah. In October of 1994, a couple of months before my shooting, I had taken the corporal's test. There was only one spot, and I scored the highest, so I became a corporal. Well, the week before, the Civil Service Commission called me in and said, "I'm sorry, we graded the papers or the test wrong. You didn't score first, you scored second," and they took my stripes. Well, that was a load of crap, and I immediately filed suit against the department. A week later, my shooting happened.
Okay. We all know the 5 stages of grief, and that occurs with critical incidents and a lot of other things. I went through the same stuff. In this order, it's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, then acceptance. But people do not necessarily experience those things.
Correct.
All of them, and in that order. Do you remember not long after your shooting, were you in denial saying that couldn't have happened? That couldn't have happened to me?
Yes. I was, you have to understand West Virginia also. The last fatal shooting we had was almost a decade ago. So this stuff didn't happen. My department had never had a fatal shooting. So, it's not something you think about. And, there was a study done in 1998, and I'm sorry, I can't tell you who did the study, but it showed that at NYPD, for the average officer, it would take 920 years before they would have to shoot and kill somebody. The average. I mean, that's how seldom it happens. And that's in New York City, so you can imagine what it's like in South Charleston, West Virginia.
Right.
And the surrounding. I mean, it just never happens. So yeah, I was in denial. It was more like disbelief. Who do I talk to? I mean, there's nobody I can talk to. I mean, they didn't offer any help, and I knew no other officer that had been through it. So I was on my own.
Okay. Now that brings up an excellent point that I read in the book. By the way, if you buy the book, folks, I'll hold it up again, The Price They Pay. Gary's story is the very beginning. It's the very first one in that particular book. So, Gary Bush, you went back to work after 3 days, and that was
yes,
it. Sir. So what occurred during those 3 days? Were you referred to counseling? Did they tell you, look, Gary, just stay home? What happened in those 3 days? And were you told just stay away for 3 days, then come back?
We got home around 5:30 on Christmas Eve, that morning. And I couldn't sleep. I mean, I felt like I'd drank 400 cups of coffee. But my wife had to go back to work at 1500. So here I was alone at 3 o'clock on Christmas Eve in the afternoon. Well, hell, the last thing I wanted to do was sit around the house by myself. So I walked down the street, and I still hadn't slept. I walked down the street to a buddy of mine, and we sat around and drank a couple of beers and talked, and I could tell as soon as he answered the door that he had no clue about my shooting, which was awesome, you know, so because I didn't have to answer any questions or, you know, and any of that mess. And we're sitting there, and he's got the television on, and his wife's sitting beside him, and I'm on the other side of the room. And they had this one of them huge televisions that takes up down near the whole wall. And all of a sudden, my face is on it. And it said, South Charleston police officer shoots and kills man. And they both look at that, and then they look at me, and I'm like, ugh. I had to go through, you know, what happened. And then my wife came home. She told her boss, she said, I can't leave Gary at home. She came home at about 1900. Didn't go to sleep that night. Got up the next morning. I had a Christmas party I was supposed to go to. Didn't want to go, but I thought, I can't hide. So I go to the Christmas party, and it's all friends. I mean, it's like my second family, and I spent 4 hours answering more questions about the shooting, and then Monday morning I finally fell asleep. I had to get up Tuesday and go to work.
Okay, so essentially you were sent home, stayed there for 3 days, came back to work. Your first day back to work, what was that like?
Horrible. I was to say I was jumpy would be an understatement. I had no sleep, so I was worn out. The stress was, off the charts, and I didn't really know what to do with myself. Comes right down to it. My shift supervisor told me, he said, well, Gary, he said, if you just want to sit at headquarters, that's fine. I'm like, no, hell no, I can't do that. And so I just went out and went back to work. And just, the hardest part for me was thinking, because, in that job, brother, you got to concentrate, and a lack of concentration will get you killed out there. So I tried to put all my energy and focus into just getting my job done that day and going home at 2300. And then the day after, and the day after, it just kept going. And that's when the shit started.
Okay, let's hold it right there. I got to take a break. Folks, we're talking to Gary Bush. I'm BZ. This is The Saloon. We're talking about suicide prevention in law enforcement. Gary Bush has been speaking with us for the past hour about that. When we come back, PTSD was a term that was not necessarily bandied about very much in the 90s. And as a result of this, there was an actual physical manifestation that occurred with Gary Bush. When we come back, I'd like to ask Gary about that. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll be right back.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
It is he that is me, bringing perspective from across the sea. Join me, Jack Alexander, 4 days a week for the Jack Alexander Experiment podcast, as I take a unique outsider's look at the news and issues affecting life and liberty here in the USA. I'll show you what the mainstream media refuses to. Politics, border security, defense, healthcare, travel, nothing is off limits. Catch the Jack Alexander Experiment podcast each Monday to Thursday on Facebook, YouTube, and everywhere good podcasts can be found. Also, check out the website www.jackalexanderexperiment.com.
It's your business diva here, Melanie Collette. I am inviting you to a front row seat as I discuss some of the most intriguing details of wealth and finance with today's movers and shakers in the world of business. Listen in and discover financial truths on a global, domestic, and household scale. Uncover topics that will impact your wallet today and in the future. Money Talk with Melanie airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. East, 2 p.m. West, right here on SHR Media and High Plains Pundit Talk Radio. You can't afford to miss it.
After 6 years covering terror and corruption, the Unpleasant Blind Guy is making a change. I'm Dave Milner. Join me on Spreaker and YouTube through SHR Media and on the Western Free Radio Network as I team up with Jeff Mitchell, host of the English Defense League radio show on blogtalkradio.com. Check show pages for airtimes. It's the Unpleasant Blind Guy.
On EDL Radio.
There's
no surrender, ever.
Because truth is not always pleasant.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And we're back. It's the beginning of the second hour. You're in the saloon with the Bloviating Zeppelin, BZ. That is me, the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show. I'll be back next Tuesday night and then next Thursday night. Next Thursday night, by the way, I'm going to have Lonnie Poindexter on again, but we'll be dealing with a separate issue of topics because after Wednesday, Thursday, I think is going to be something similar to Off the Hook. Tuesday, I think I'm going to have an SHR Media special report about a summary of what happened, and you know what I'm talking about, and where we're going. In the meantime, we're talking to Gary Bush. The topic tonight is suicide prevention in law enforcement because he has been very, very close. So when last we spoke, I mentioned PTSD. In the 90s, nobody really knew what the hell PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, was. People don't realize that can manifest itself not just in terms of the mind and how it handles things, but it can manifest physically. So, did you have any symptoms of PTSD that manifested into a physical venue after your shooting?
It took a while for it to manifest itself physically. But, you know, there are small things that you start noticing. I'd wake up and my jaws would be killing me because I would grit my teeth at night because of the nightmares I was having.
Right.
My hands would start shaking out of nowhere. The paranoia would cause, I mean, let's put it this way. I know your listeners and your viewers, they know what fight or flight is.
Right.
You know, and you know, when you think about it, if you're getting ready to go through a green light and all of a sudden somebody runs through a red and damn near clocks you, your heart goes up in your throat. Well, having PTSD is being like that all the time, 24 hours a day. And your stomach is constantly messed up. The heartburn is unbelievable. And because, and I know I'm not telling you anything, but, you know, as far as the things that have come physically, it was amazing. And I didn't understand any of this because I didn't know anything about it. I hadn't researched it. In fact, when I was diagnosed, the guy said, or the psychologist, I finally went to one, and he was an old friend of my father's, and he said, Gary, take this questionnaire for me. It's 20 questions. Just yes or no. Well, when I got done, I handed it to him, and he said, well, you scored 19 out of 20. And I'm thinking, wow, that's an A. But no, this was supposed to be like golf. The lower the score, the better. And there was only one symptom that I didn't have at that time.
Okay.
And he said, Gary, this is about the worst case I've ever seen.
What I was looking at, and I read this in the book, and I'd like to confirm it or deny it here to see if they were accurate. In the book, The Price They Pay, and folks, we're talking to Gary Bush as we're discussing suicide prevention in law enforcement tonight. In the book, The Price They Pay, which came out in 2015, the authors indicated that after the shooting, you experienced a physical manifestation of blindness. Now, were they accurate?
Oh, yeah. But that didn't happen until May. 5 months after my shooting, I'm on patrol, day shift, and my chief jumps on the radio and tells me, and by the way, college students, sometimes if they're riding, they're ride-alongs. They're getting their degree in criminal justice, and they have to do so many hours of riding with a police officer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had one with me, and chief comes across the radio and says, I need you to go to the police academy and talk about your shooting. Well, hell, the only people I talked to my shooting about was my wife and the state police. And he didn't ask me. He ordered me. So I go up there, and I spend an hour and a half talking about my shooting, and I got very upset. And when I left, she and I were going back to headquarters. It was time for us to go home. And I was on a 4-lane highway, 50 mile an hour speed limit, and all of a sudden, I went blind. I just lost my eyesight, period. Not blurry, not gray, black. And I knew what was behind me, so I slowed down, and I reached over and flipped my rotates on, my lights, stopped the vehicle. She said, what's wrong? I said, I can't see. Well, she starts screaming and carrying on, and I threw the vehicle, parked, and hollered at headquarters. I said, send me a 32, which is a ambulance. And I sat there and waited. It was scared the shit out of me. Excuse my French. The paramedics came and got me and put me in the ambulance, took my vest off, my gun belt, and all that crap. And as soon as I got in the ambulance, my eyesight came back, and I had the worst headache I've ever had in my life. And the doctor said I had a migraine. And he said it was from the stress of me talking to that academy class.
Okay, you weren't given a choice. You were told to go to that class, and you were told to discuss the situation. 5 months after the shooting, you were, I think, diagnosed as having clinical depression. Then you experienced, Then you experienced a migraine. Did the migraines continue?
No, and knock on wood, haven't had one since. But that scared me to death, and it was the beginning of realizing what was happening to me. That my body was saying, that's enough. I can't take any more of this. My body's telling me this. But I just kept going, ignored what my doctor told me. You need to get on medication, Gary. No, I'm not doing it. You need to come see me. No, not doing it. I'm not a wacko. I'm not insane. I'm not going to see you. And I'm not taking medication. Things went south after that.
Okay. Did they, That brings up an interesting point. Did they recommend medication at all?
My doctor did, yes.
Okay.
But I told him no. Like I said, I'm not crazy. I don't need medication.
Okay.
That's how ignorant I was of the situation. I was completely ignorant. Had no idea. Never heard of PTSD. Didn't know what it was. Clinical depression. Yeah, I've heard of depression, but didn't really know what that was either. But as the summer went on, I became more and more despondent. I started sleeping less. I started, little things would make me cry. And I'm an emotional person anyway, but above normal, And then coming around August, I started thinking about eating my gun. I thought about shooting myself and ending it because I can't live like this.
Well, it was funny you're talking about that because I was reading in the book, The Price They Pay. They were indicating that about 8 months after the shooting, that became your world.
Yeah, exactly. In August. That was my world. I would go to work, and then I would go home and I would try to stay alive. Try to stay alive at work and try to stay alive at home. At work, I started not to give a crap about what I was doing and whether I was being tactically aware or safe or not. I was praying for it to end.
All during this time, and that's your mindset at the time, and right. you were continually in that phase for a while. What were the effects on your wife, Carmen, and your family?
I basically sequestered myself. I didn't. I knew where I was in a good place, and I didn't want my wife to be around it. So I kind of stayed away from her, which that didn't help either, as far as helping me or her. And I started. It got to the point where I started taking medication around the middle of October. Finally went to a psychiatrist, and I mean, oh my gosh, the side effects from some of the meds were just horrific. But I still had the okay from my psychiatrist and my psychologist to continue working. And until late November came along, and it was on 5 years to the day that I was hired, November 25th of 1995. I got a call of a domestic and went to answer the call, and there was an 18-year-old kid that had just beat his girlfriend horribly. And when I got there, I told him, "Put your hands behind your back, you're under arrest," and he wouldn't. And I told him, I said, either you put your hands behind your back, or, and then he started cussing me. And you use as much force as you can, or as little force as you can to effect the arrest. I mean, that's what the force continuum is all about in law enforcement, as you know. And what I did was I stomped the shit out of this kid. And then put him in handcuffs and threw him in the back of my cruiser and somebody else had to take him to the hospital. I went back to headquarters, finished my paperwork, went up to the locker room. I took my uniform off. I hung it up, and I knew that was the last time I'd ever wear it.
That was November 25th, 1995, correct?
Yes, sir.
And before that, the day before that, didn't you receive a telephone call at the station?
Yeah.
What did that consist of?
I keep forgetting you read that. I'm sitting at headquarters, and I was doing some paperwork, and the phone rings. And I picked the phone up because they said, Gary, phone for you. And I answered the phone, and the lady says, "Is this Officer Bush?" And I'm like, "Yes, ma'am." And she said, and I don't remember her name, but she said, "I'm Franklin Knuckles' sister." Franklin Knuckles was the name of the man that I killed.
Okay.
And immediately I'm like, oh, geez. She said, my doctor just told me 2 days ago that I've got about 2 months to live. I've been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And she said, before I go, I got to tell you something. And then she proceeds to tell me how he never held the family hostage, that he was just drunk and being an ass, and they wanted to get rid of him, having put in jail for the weekend so they could enjoy Christmas. So they called headquarters and lied about it. And lied about it when I got there. So here I'm thinking I got a hostage situation, and actually, all I got's a drunk jerk being an ass to his family, who just happened to have a rifle, but an unloaded rifle with him.
So after that, your last day at work was November 25th in 1995, and then you retired January 29th, 1996. Between November of 95 and January of 96, what transpired between that time?
Well, I didn't hear from anybody, believe it or not. That's how supportive our administration was. And I still had them tied up in court over my corporal stripes. And the chief of police calls me one day, and it's coming right up. It was 2 days before the anniversary of my shooting. And he says, I hear you had depression. I said, yes, sir. He said, I hear you have PT, and he couldn't even remember the other two. I said, PTSD. I said, yes, sir. He said, I also heard you're on medication. I said, yes, sir. He said, and why in the F did you not tell me? I said, because it's none of your business. If my psychiatrist and my psychologist tell me and you that I'm okay to work, that's all you need to know. And, excuse me, but this is a quote. He said, you're nothing but a pussy.
That was the chief?
Yep.
Was that also the chief of police who did not come to your shooting scene that night?
Sir. Yes, sir.
How many shootings had your department experienced up to that point?
Fatal shooting, 0.
Okay. And yet that wasn't worthwhile of the chief getting out of bed for you?
No, sir.
Okay, there's your support.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Folks, we're talking to Gary Bush. The subject tonight is suicide prevention in law enforcement. Gary went through his own critical incident. You retired in 1996. In retrospect, Do you think that was the appropriate time to retire? Should you have retired earlier? Or do you think you should have retired later?
Definitely not later.
Okay.
Because the reason I retired, BZ, is because when I took that oath, as we all did, I swore to protect and serve the citizens of the area, the jurisdiction that I worked in. I not only became a danger to those people, but I became a danger to those of our brothers and sisters that I worked with, because I wasn't thinking straight. And what I did to that kid was inexcusable. And I could not live with myself if I stayed out there as much of a threat as I was to both. So now, should I have retired earlier? Maybe. I know this, if I'd gotten the help that I got, who knows? Maybe I could have stayed, but who knows?
Well, Gary Bush, essentially workers' comp told you to go to hell, didn't they?
Yeah. Yeah, they did.
And then afterwards, you went on something of a national tour for therapy. Literally, a national tour for therapy, did you not?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Both coasts and a whole lot of states in between. Just searching for a cure, something to help me want to live the next day or to make it through today. I went everywhere. It was so frustrating. I'd go through it, and at the end of it, I'd be like, well, that didn't do, I didn't do anything.
All during this time, did you have suicidal ideations?
Oh, yeah. Every day. Many, many, many times a day.
So you were desperately looking for some kind of an answer.
Yes, sir. I didn't want to die. I mean, I killed a man to stay alive. If I was going to kill myself, I might as well have done it before that, right? I mean, why go through that? I did the ultimate to stay alive, and now I want to kill myself? It made no sense to me. But also, my illness made no sense to me. I couldn't comprehend it. I couldn't get a grasp on it.
Now, by 2011, not much had changed, but then you found that group, Hunting for Heroes. Were they able to help you?
What helped me is I got to deal with other disabled police officers for the first time. And I didn't feel like the Lone Ranger, which I had felt like up until then. So that's how it helped. And there were some very kind people that ran that organization, which I'm sad to say no longer exist. But yes, they did help. And in fact, I'm still friends with most of the people I met. We still get to keep in contact on phone and through social media. But yes, they did help.
So Gary Bush, before and after your shooting, was religion somehow integral to your situation?
God is the only reason I'm still alive. Without my faith in the Lord and there's a lot of as far as the body being the temple, which the Lord teaches, and I've been that way my whole life. I was raised in a Christian home. Putting a bullet in my head doesn't quite go with that, Number one, number two, and I'm not here to argue what other people think, but as far as suicide, I was taught that your chances of going to heaven if you commit suicide are slim to none, because after you kill yourself, you can't ask for forgiveness. So that played a big part. But, you know, it even went past that, because it was like I didn't care anymore. I didn't care about God. I didn't care about any of it. And all I wanted was the pain to stop. That's all. That's all I wanted.
So, Gary Bush, during those darkest times, what do you think actually kept you from committing suicide?
Well, I'll tell you, my father-in-law, God bless him, who is gone now, and my mother-in-law, who was also gone now, but he was a preacher, and I had such guilt over killing this man. You know, we had talked about the 5 degrees, and the guilt just, it was eating me up. He kept me alive. My mother-in-law kept me alive. My stepson, knowing how much he depended on me, that kept me alive. And my dear sweet wife, that angel, she kept me alive. They never gave up on me, even though I had given up on myself. And I had some really good friends along the way too.
Okay. The 5 stages of grief, you went through denial.
Yes, sir.
Did you experience anger?
No, and that's, you know, everybody's like, man, I'd be pissed off at that guy. And I have never been angry at him. Not once.
Okay.
Felt sorry for him. I hated that he had to die, but better him than me. You know, as you and I have talked before, you know, don't point a weapon at a police officer. You know, it's pretty simple. You know, we carry that weapon for a reason. That's to protect ourselves, first of all, and others also. Because a dead police officer is worth nothing to anybody.
In the 5 stages of depression, did you experience bargaining?
Well, you know, it's funny. When I was begging God to save his life, I was going through bargaining at that moment.
Actually, yes, you were, weren't you?
Yes, sir. Even before he died. So, yeah, I would have to say I did. And then the bargaining that came after was, Lord, help me make it through the day. And if you do, I will do my best. And, you know, as we talked about this, BZ, the reason that I'm speaking to you and to your listeners and your viewers is it's all about education. I vowed that if I had anything to do with it, that none of my brothers and sisters, our brothers and sisters in law enforcement, would ever have to go through what I went through if I had anything to do with it. And that was part of the bargaining also. Lord, help me. Please, help me so I can help them.
Let's stop right there just for a second. We're going to take a break. When we come back, folks, we're talking to Gary Bush, and the topic tonight is suicide prevention in law enforcement. Gary Bush went through his own critical incident, and if you've been listening, you've heard how it massively affected his life, his performance, what happened to him in the future. When we come back, I'd like to start to talk to Gary Bush about depression and or the final stage of the 5 elements of grief, acceptance. Was there ever acceptance? You're in the Slew, and I'm BZ, and we'll be right back after this.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Southern Sense is conservative talk with Annie, the radio chick you bellows as host, and C.S. Bennett co-host. Informative, fun, irreverent, and politically incorrect. You never know where they'll go, but you'll love the journey. Annie is a top conservative host on Top Talk Radio and features some of the finest guests packed with important politicians and newsmakers. Listen every Friday, 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern, noon to 3 Pacific, on the SHR Media Network. Remember, Southern Sense is common sense.
Hey, are you guys listening? This is Shannon from Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM on SHR Media. I know you've been wondering where we are and what's been going on. Well, folks, that's right, we're back. So please join us 7 to 9 a.m. Monday through Thursday on SHR Media, on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and Spotify, and Facebook Live at 11 a.m. on Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM at Facebook. You don't want to miss a minute. We've got lots of guests, lots of segments, and lots of interesting things. And let's face it, there's nowhere for you to go, so you might as well tune in. Again, Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM. We're back live on the air on SHR Media, 7 to 9 a.m. Monday through Thursday, audio and Facebook Live, audio and video. Yes, we are going to do video. Facebook Live, Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM. Hope to see you soon.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for being here tonight. We've been speaking to Gary Bush about suicide prevention in law enforcement. He's been through his own critical incident. And I wanted him to be here tonight so that folks can understand that when something like this occurs, cops don't get up and just walk away. Frequently, we become damaged material. We are damaged goods. And that when people seem to think that we are so terribly callous that we simply walk away, shrug it off, and it's a brand new day, it doesn't work out that way. It doesn't work out that way at all. There's help available now. The help available to me in the 1970s was Zip, Zero, the null set. Didn't happen. Took a day off. Went right back to work. And then I was going to be prosecuted by the state. And then I was going to be prosecuted by the feds. That's a story for another day. In any event, you came here tonight, Gary Bush, in order to make these various revelations and let people know how this personally impacted you. But I think if there's one thing that you told me and that I read in your book, it's not your book, but your story is the very first story in this book. If you're on video, if you're watching, here's the book that I'm referring to. It's called The Price They Pay. It was published in 2015. The authors are Karen Solomon and Jeffrey McGill. I bought this through Barnes & Noble. You can too. I would highly recommend it if you're interested in the topic. But to get to the very point that I have to say astounded me through this entire journey, this massive travail that you encountered, 3 hours changed it. And after you told me that, which instantly, initially, I couldn't believe, 3 hours, that's not possible. I'd like you to tell people about, let me see, that was Safe Call Now, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That's who I called.
All right. So, and I've got the number, and I've got a bunch of numbers at the end of the show for reference. But I still find it difficult to believe, and I would like you to tell us, Gary Bush, in 3 hours, what the hell happened and how did that change you?
You want me to start with the phone call?
Sure.
That's what I...
Sure.
Well, I was sitting here at my computer on a Tuesday morning, 02, and sitting here with my gun in my mouth as usual, which I've been doing for 20-some years now. And I thought, well, I'll get on the internet one more time, and something I'd done for years is look up help for disabled police officers. That's what I would type in, and nothing, you know. And things I did find weren't worth a hoot. Anyway, I got to about the third or fourth page, and I find this organization called Safe Call Now, and it had a 24-hour number. I was like, oh. So I called the number, and this young lady answered the phone. She was either retired or an ex-officer. I can't remember. But we talked for about an hour, and she said, what are you doing Friday? And I said, oh, you know, same thing I'm doing right now. And she said, would you go to therapy? And, you know, I've been to thousands of hours of therapy, and all different types of therapy. But, you know, well, I didn't have a choice. It was either that or end it. And that really wasn't much of a choice. So I said, yes, I went on Friday and met this young lady who, she happened to be a 10-year veteran of ATF. So I knew, I mean, her being a sister, I knew that she would have a clue about what I was dealing with. Her husband retired from Miami PD, so I felt comfortable immediately. And I go in and sit down, and she says, and I'll understand something here. Rapid resolution therapy, which is what this therapy is called, is not something that I can explain very well, because it's a little bit of hypnosis and a little bit of changing the way you think about your trauma. You know, basically, we have the trauma is built into us, and it's right. It gets stuck in our frontal lobe when it happens. That's why we can't forget it, because it's right there, instead of like the rest of our memories that we put in the back and file it away. The trauma is stuck right in front. And I went through that therapy. I walked out of there, and I was amazed. The world had been lifted off my shoulders. And one of the things about the therapy is she said, all right, just pick a story, a traumatic story, you know, and just give me 5 or 10 minutes of it, you know, the gist of it. I said, all right. So I told about my shooting. She said, now, I want you to pick a word, any word. I said, all right, flower. She said, now tell that story again and just use that word. Flower, 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 flower. And I'm thinking of the words that I want to say, but I'm just saying flower in place of them. It took the strength of that event and those words that I had used to tell that story over and over and over again. It took that strength away. And I mean, I cried tonight telling you about, and your listeners and viewers, about this story, but that's the first time I've cried since I saw her about this while telling the story. But, you know, it was amazing to me. And, you know, for 20 years, I had nightmares every single night. I mean, the paranoia, it was a miserable life. And all of a sudden, all that crap, not all of it, about 95% of it was gone. And to this day, 6 years later, it's still gone. Now, I have had 22 officers, friends of mine that I've met on social media, friends from West Virginia, and other conferences and things that I've been to. 22 other officers come down here, and it helped 20 out of 22, the same way it helped me. It works. That's all I can say. Doesn't work for everybody. No therapy does. But it works, and it worked for me. It saved my life. Safe Call Now saved my life. Serve and Protect saved my life. Sean Riley at Safe Call Now and Rob at, they saved my life. Really, I can't stress that enough.
Gary Bush, before my mother-in-law passed away, she was notified that she had pancreatic cancer. 2 months later, she was dead. One of the things that I remember from her distinctly was this line. Everyone is put on this planet for a reason. Sometimes the reason is to be an example of what not to do in life. Translated, that means we all have lessons to learn. So, yes, Gary Bush, if there's one thing you learned throughout all of this, what would that distill down to be?
Trust our Lord and Savior and never give up. Never.
So I'm assuming that that's what you'd want to say to other officers as well.
And that's what I do say to them.
Okay. Do you still speak to officers?
Oh, yeah, every day. I spoke to one yesterday. He sent me a text and said, Gary, my depression's killing me. It just so happens this guy I went to high school with. But he got hurt, line of duty, and he's hurting inside. And we talked for an hour and a half yesterday. Like I said, that is what I cannot sit by and watch our brothers and sisters go through what I went through. I won't do it. And I'm doing what I can not to, so that they can have a better life.
So, Gary Bush, do you work for any organizations or companies right now that help officers through this? Or is this something that you're essentially doing on a personal level?
Personal level. I don't work for anybody.
Okay. You have in the past, though, have you not?
Not really. I've worked in conjunction with, in fact, Safe Call Now and Serve and Protect. I just said, I told you about the guy who shoved the 20 questions in front of me in 1995.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Safe Call Now and Serve and Protect now have him under their wing or in their list of referrals, because I spent the last 3 days hooking them up together. Excuse me. And so, here we are, he and I, 25 years later, and we're still kicking it. And all he does now is help police officers. So it's Dr. David Klingman. What an amazing man. A true man, good man.
Folks, I'm going to read some organizations and some phone numbers. Before I do that, Gary Bush, do you have any organizations or phone numbers that you would recommend? for officers that are having troubles?
You have the Safe Call Now and the Serve and Protect, correct?
I have Safe Call Now. This is one that... Well, let me just give you the ones that I have right now, folks, and I'll go over them. Safe Call Now, that's the one that particularly worked for Gary Bush. That number is 206-459-3020. 206-459-3020. 206-459-3020. I also have another organization called Copline. 1-800-267-5463. 1-800-267-5463. 1-800-267-5463. Then there's another that I have called Cop to Cop. That's 1-866, simple, cop to cop. 1-866, cop, the number 2, cop. 1-866, cop to cop. Gary, any others that you can think of?
Yes, sir. The Serve and Protect organization is named, the gentleman who started it is I think he's an Army veteran, either that or Navy, I can't remember, forgive me. His name was Robert Michaels, or Rob Michaels. His phone number is 615-373-8000. 615-373-8000. 615-373-8000. Serve and Protect. This gentleman, no matter where you live, and along with Safe Call Now, and I imagine the other two that you mentioned, if you need help, I don't care where you are, they will find you somebody. And please understand, those of you who are listening and watching, I spent 4 years going to a therapist, my first 4 years, that knew nothing about post-traumatic stress disorder. Don't do that. Please, find somebody that knows what they're dealing with when it comes to PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. It will save you a whole lot of time and a whole lot of heartache.
Gary Bush, thank you so kindly for being here tonight. Do you have any final words that you'd like to say?
Well, I thank you for your time. I thank you for your platform. I thank your listeners, your viewers, for spending the time they did with us. And you are doing a good thing, brother. And I can't thank you enough for it. And I am always here if you ever need me. Never forget that.
Well, thank you very much. I think I'm going to try to see if I can get in touch with a gentleman by the name of Randy Sutton from the Wounded Blue, and see.
Yeah, Lieutenant Randy Sutton. He's a good man.
See if I can get him on to talk about. We've spoken tonight to Gary Bush about the end user, the law enforcement officer. I'd like to talk to a little bit later about the individuals that are involved in various organizations trying to help the individual officers themselves. So that'll be a show probably in the future if I can make that happen. So again, Gary Bush, thank you so kindly for being here tonight, especially in these challenging times, these challenging 2020 and 2021 times on every level. Thank you so much for staying up late because, let's see, it's 9:51 on the left coast, and that means it's 12:51 where you are in Florida. So again, Gary Bush, thank you, sir, for staying up so late.
That's this old man's bedtime.
Yes, mine as well.
Hey, brother. God bless you.
Okay, God bless you, sir. Take care and be safe, sir.
Thank you.
Gary Bush, and it's time to go.
Monsieur, I can walk.
We'll meet again. Don't know when, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. Keep smiling through, just like you always do, till the blue skies drive the dark clouds far away. So will you please say hello to the folks that I know? Tell them I won't be long. They'll be happy to know that as you saw me go, I was singing this song. We'll meet again. Don't know when, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny
Everybody quiet down now and get some sleep.
Night, everybody.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Ben.
Good night, everyone. Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Good night, children.
Good night, Daddy. Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob. Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.
What's going on? I was asleep. What's everybody doing?
Good night.
Good night, Jim Bob.
Go back to sleep.
Good night and good luck.